the Self-Worth and Confidence for Women Blueprint, a self-esteem, self-love, and personal empowerment guide for women to overcome self-doubt, build unshakable inner confidence, and stop playing small by Rachel Dane. Introduction. On January 20, 1993, a cold wind blew across the streets of Washington, D.C. Millions of people watched as a tall, regal woman stepped up to the microphone. She wore a bright yellow coat and a look of total peace. This was Maya Angelou. She was about to do something no poet had done in over 30 years. She was going to speak at the inauguration of a president. When she began to speak, her voice didn't just carry through the speakers. It seemed to vibrate in the chests of everyone listening. She spoke of rocks, rivers, and trees. She spoke of a new morning. She looked like the very definition of confidence. To the world, she was a giant, a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. The woman standing on that stage had a secret. For 5 years of her childhood, she had been completely silent. She didn't say a single word to anyone except her brother. After a terrible trauma, she believed her voice had the power to kill people. She decided that if she didn't speak, she couldn't hurt anyone. She spent half a decade trapped inside her own mind, convinced she was dangerous and worthless. Her journey from that heavy, dusty silence to the bright stage in Washington, D.C. wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just luck. It was the result of a slow, steady process of rebuilding. She had to learn that her voice was a gift, not a curse. She had to decide that she was allowed to take up space. Her worth wasn't something the world gave her. It was something she found deep inside herself during those years of silence. Most women know what it feels like to have a voice but feel unable to use it. You might not have spent 5 years in literal silence, but you might spend 5 days a week dimming your light at work. You might spend your weekends saying yes to things that make you tired because you are afraid of what people will think if you say no. The invisible wall there is a gap that exists for many women today. It is the distance between how talented you actually are and how much you believe in yourself. You can have the degrees, the experience, and the skills, but still feel like you are walking on thin ice. This is the confidence gap. It is an invisible wall that keeps you from reaching for the life you actually want. A famous study looked at how men and women apply for jobs. It found that men will apply for a promotion if they meet only 60% of the requirements. They figure they can learn the rest on the go. But most women won't apply unless they meet 100% of the criteria. They feel they have to be perfect before they are even allowed to try. This isn't because women are less capable. It is because of a dimmer switch we have been taught to use. From the time we are little girls, many of us are given an unwritten script. This script tells us that a good woman is quiet, helpful, and doesn't cause trouble. We are told to be nice instead of powerful. We are told to put everyone else's needs in front of our own. When you follow that script for years, you start to lose track of who you actually are. Your self-worth becomes like a currency that goes up and down based on what other people think of you. If someone praises you, you feel rich. If someone criticizes you, or if you make a small mistake, you feel bankrupt. You start playing small just to stay safe. You stay in the shadows because you are afraid that if you step into the light, people will see that you don't really belong there. The view from the boardroom. In a high-rise office building in Seattle, Sarah Jenkins sits in a glass-walled meeting room. She is 34 years old and is a senior project manager at a big financial tech firm. On paper, Sarah is a rock star. She managed a project last year that saved her company millions of dollars. She is the person everyone goes to when things get complicated. But right now, Sarah's palms are sweating. Her heart is thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. The leaders of the company are discussing a major budget error. Sarah is looking at her notepad. She found the error 3 days ago. She has the solution written down in neat blue ink. She opens her mouth to speak, but the words get stuck in her throat. A voice inside her head, her inner critic, starts whispering, "What if you're wrong? What if they think you're being bossy? You should probably wait until someone else notices. You don't want to be too much." As she hesitates, a junior male colleague, someone Sarah actually trained, clears his throat. He says exactly what is written on Sarah's notepad. He isn't 100% sure, and his data isn't as good as hers, but he speaks with total authority. The room goes quiet. The vice president smiles and says, "That's brilliant. Great catch." Sarah feels a wave of nausea. She isn't just mad at her colleague, she is mad at herself. She had the answer. She did the work, but she stayed invisible. This is what playing small looks like in real life. It's not just a feeling, it's a series of moments where you choose safety over your own power. Sarah is a high achiever, low believer. She does the work of 3 people, but she credits luck for her success. Every time she gets a promotion, she waits for the fraud police to knock on her door and tell her she doesn't belong. She is exhausted from trying to be perfect, yet she feels like she is never enough. The truth about worth. If you feel like Sarah, you aren't alone. And more importantly, there is nothing wrong with you. You haven't failed. You have simply been using a blueprint that wasn't designed for your growth. You have been building your house on the shifting sands of other people's opinions. This book is about building a new foundation. It is about moving from playing small to having unshakable inner confidence. There is a big difference between self-worth and confidence. Self-worth is the deep, quiet knowledge that you are valuable just because you exist. It doesn't change when you lose your job, or when a relationship ends, or when you gain 10 pounds. It is your internal sanctuary. Confidence, on the other hand, is about what you do. It is a muscle you build by taking action. You don't wait to feel confident before you do something hard. You do the hard thing, and the confidence grows as a result. The transformation you are about to go through is about more than just feeling better about yourself. It is about changing the way you move through the world. By the end of this journey, you will stop apologizing for taking up space. You will set boundaries with friends and family without feeling like a villain. You will look in the mirror and see an ally, not a stranger or a project that needs fixing. You will handle failure as data rather than a verdict on your value. You will speak your truth even when your voice is shaking. A reliable map. You might wonder if this is actually possible. Can a person really change how they feel deep down? The answer is yes, but it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through a specific process. This blueprint is built on 4 pillars: awareness, seeing the cracked mirrors that shaped how you see yourself; deconstruction, tearing down the unwritten script and the dimmer switch; reconstruction, building your internal sanctuary and learning to trust your own instincts; mastery, taking your new power out into the world to lead, negotiate, and thrive. This isn't just theory. This approach is backed by the stories of women who faced much bigger obstacles than a boardroom meeting. We will look at Eleanor Roosevelt, who was told by her own mother that she was an ugly duckling, and who went on to become one of the most powerful diplomats in history. We will look at Hedy Lamarr, a woman the world saw only as a pretty face, while she was secretly inventing the technology that makes your Wi-Fi work today. These women didn't have special genes that made them brave. They simply decided to stop letting the world's mirror define them. They chose to write their own scripts. The road ahead, we are going to start at the very beginning. We will go back to the mirror and look at where your ideas of worth first came from. We will figure out why your success feels like a lie and how to stop the imposter syndrome from stealing your joy. We will talk about the architecture of perfectionism. You will learn why trying to be perfect is actually a cage that keeps you small, and how to embrace good enough so you can finally be great. We will tackle the hard stuff too. We will talk about boundaries, how to build gates that protect your energy without locking people out. We will talk about your body and how to stop seeing it as an ornament and start seeing it as an instrument for your life. Finally, we will move into action. You will learn the strategies for unshakable self-advocacy. Whether you are asking for a raise, starting a business, or just asking for what you need at home, you will learn how to do it with authority. Sarah Jenkins is still sitting in that boardroom in Seattle. She is tired of being the most hardworking person in the room while also being the most invisible. She is ready for a change. She is ready to stop wondering if she is qualified and start knowing she is essential. Your journey is starting right along with hers. You don't need to have all the answers yet. You don't even need to feel brave right now. You just need to be willing to look in the mirror and see something new. The dimmer switch has been turned down for far too long. It is time to see what happens when you live at full luminosity. Where did your mirror start? We have to look back before we can move forward. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Mirror of Worth, Why We See. Imagine standing high above a busy city as the sun begins to peek over the buildings. From this height, you can see the same pattern repeating in thousands of homes. A light clicks on. A woman walks into a bathroom. She stands in front of a mirror. For a few seconds, she stays still. She isn't looking at the color of her eyes or the shape of her smile. She is looking for flaws. She is checking to see if she looks right or enough for the world outside. She is looking into a piece of glass to tell her who she is. This habit didn't start this morning. It started years ago, in a time we barely remember, when we first learned to see ourselves through the eyes of other people. We aren't born doubting our value. Babies don't look at their reflection and wish their nose was smaller or their voice was quieter. They simply exist. But slowly, the world begins to hand us a script. It tells us how to act, how to look, and how much space we are allowed to take up. In the late 1800s, in a fancy house in New York City, a little girl named Alina lived through this every single day. On the outside, her life looked perfect. She was born into a wealthy, powerful family. But inside that house, the mirror she was given was broken. Alina's mother, Anna, was a legendary beauty. She was the kind of woman people stopped to stare at in the street. Alina, however, was a shy child with a serious face and front teeth that stuck out a bit. Instead of seeing a child full of potential, Anna saw a disappointment. She nicknamed her daughter Granny because she thought Alina was too plain and too old-fashioned. When guests came over, Anna would often sigh and tell them, "She is such a funny child, so old-fashioned." She said these things right in front of Alina. Alina grew up believing she was an ugly duckling. Because the person who was supposed to love her most saw her as a failure, Alina began to see herself that way too. She carried that heavy, dark mirror with her for decades. It made her walk with her shoulders slumped. It made her keep her voice low. It made her feel like she was a guest in her own life, someone who didn't really belong at the table with the beautiful and the bold. The primary mirror, the way we see ourselves today, is usually a reflection of how we were seen as children. Psychologists call this the primary mirror. This isn't a physical mirror made of glass. It is made of the people who raised us, taught us, and watched us grow. When you were small, you were like a sponge. You didn't have the tools to decide if someone's opinion of you was true or false. If a teacher told you that you were bad at math, you didn't think, "That teacher is having a bad day." You thought, "I am bad at math." If a parent told you to be a good girl and stay quiet, you didn't think, "They are tired and want some peace." You thought, "My voice is a problem. I am better when I am invisible." This creates a mental framework that stays with us long after we move out of our childhood homes. We can break this framework down into 3 parts. The reflection. This is what the world tells us they see. It's the nicknames, the grades, and the helpful advice about our hair or our weight. The filter. This is the dimmer switch. If we are told we are too loud, we turn our light down. If we are told we are plain, we stop trying to stand out. We change our behavior to match the reflection. The identity. Eventually, we forget the world gave us these labels. We start to believe they are our own ideas. We look in the mirror and think, "I'm just not a leader," or "I'm not the pretty one." In the 1940s, 2 researchers named Mamie and Kenneth Clark proved just how early these mirrors start to work. They did a famous study known as the doll test. They showed young children 2 dolls that were exactly the same, except for the color of their skin. They asked the children which doll was nice and which was pretty. Even children as young as 5 years old chose the doll that matched the preferred image they saw in movies and books. These children hadn't done anything wrong. They were simply reflecting the world around them. They were looking into a societal mirror that told them some people were more valuable than others. When you grow up looking into a mirror that tells you that you are less than because of your gender, your looks, or your background, you start to believe it before you even know how to tie your shoes. Keeping the lights low for Sarah Jenkins, a project manager in Seattle, the primary mirror was her father's approval. Sarah was a bright, energetic child. She loved to build things and lead the neighborhood kids in games. But whenever she got too excited, her father would give her a certain look. "Sarah," he would say, "nobody likes a girl who bosses people around. Just be a good, quiet girl." He thought he was helping her. He thought he was teaching her how to be liked. But what Sarah heard was, "Your power makes people uncomfortable. If you want to be loved, you must stay small." Sarah learned to use the dimmer switch. Every time she felt a spark of ambition or a desire to speak up, she would mentally reach for that switch and turn it down. She became the good girl. She got straight A's, she never caused trouble, and she made sure everyone else was happy before she thought about herself. Now, at 34, Sarah stands in her bedroom in Seattle and looks at her reflection. She is wearing a gray sweater and black pants, the same outfit she wears almost every day. She chooses clothes that help her blend into the office walls. She looks at her face and sees someone who looks tired and fine. But she doesn't see the woman who has the smartest ideas in the room. She doesn't see the woman who could be running the whole company. She only sees the quiet girl her father wanted her to be. She has been playing a role for so long that she doesn't know who is under the costume. She is a high achiever on paper, but a low believer in her heart. She does the work of 3 people, but when she looks in the mirror, she sees a stranger. The protection of silence sometimes, when the mirror the world gives us is too painful or too dangerous, we find ways to hide our true selves entirely. This isn't because we are weak, it is a way to survive. Maya Angelou, one of the most powerful voices the world has ever known, spent 5 years of her childhood in total silence. After a terrible trauma, she believed that her voice had the power to kill. She decided that if she didn't speak, she couldn't hurt anyone, and no one could get close enough to hurt her. During those years of silence, Maya didn't have an external mirror. She wasn't talking to friends or performing for teachers. Instead, she began to build an internal sanctuary. She read every book in the local library. She memorized poetry. She listened to the way people talked and the way the wind moved through the trees. Because she wasn't using her energy to play small or be a good girl for others, she was able to develop a deep inner worth. She realized that her value didn't come from what people said about her. It came from the songs and stories living inside her. She eventually found her voice again, but she never forgot those years. She realized that the silence didn't make her smaller, it made her stronger. She learned that she didn't need the world to tell her who she was. She had already decided. Many of us are still in our own kind of silence. We might be talking, but we aren't saying what we really think. We might be working, but we aren't doing what we really love. We are hiding behind a version of ourselves that we think is safe from judgment. We are waiting for someone to give us a better mirror, not realizing that we are the ones holding the glass. Reclaiming the mirror, the good news is that mirrors can be cleaned and old scripts can be rewritten. Eleanor Roosevelt didn't stay the ugly duckling forever. As she got older, she began to realize that her mother's opinion of her wasn't a fact, it was just one person's point of view. Eleanor started to do things that scared her. She moved away from her judgmental family and began working in poor neighborhoods in New York. She found that, when she was helping others, she forgot to worry about whether her teeth stuck out. She found that people didn't care if she was a legendary beauty. They cared that she was kind, smart, and brave. She started to build a new mirror, piece by piece. Every time she spoke up for someone who couldn't speak for themselves, the mirror got a little clearer. Every time she traveled to a new place or learned a new skill, the granny label faded away. She famously said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." This is the first step of the blueprint. You have to realize that you have been giving your consent to a version of yourself that isn't true. You have been looking into a cracked mirror. To start cleaning your mirror, you have to look at the primary mirror that shaped you. Ask yourself these questions. Who was the first person who told me who I was? What names or labels did they give me? The smart one, the quiet one, the difficult one? Do I still believe those labels are true today? Whose voice am I hearing when I criticize myself in the morning? Most of the time, the voice in your head isn't even yours. It's a ghost from your past. It's a teacher from 3rd grade, a grumpy relative, or a social media post that made you feel like you weren't enough. When you identify that the voice isn't yours, it loses its power. The looking glass self. In 1902, a man named Charles Cooley came up with a theory called the looking glass self. He said that we don't actually see ourselves for who we are. Instead, we see ourselves based on what we think other people see. Think about that for a second. It's like a game of telephone. 1, you have a thought about yourself. 2, you imagine what your boss thinks of you. 3, you change your behavior based on that imaginary thought. We are living in a house of mirrors where everything is distorted. We overapologize in meetings because we imagine people think we are being too pushy. We don't post our art because we imagine people will think it's silly. We are reacting to shadows, not reality. Breaking this habit requires us to stop looking at the reflection and start looking at the source. The source is your inherent value. You were born with it. It isn't something you earn by being pretty, thin, rich, or quiet. It is a non-negotiable part of being human. Sarah Jenkins is starting to see this. The other day, she was at her childhood home looking at an old photo of herself when she was 6. In the photo, she is standing on a tree stump, pointing at something in the distance, looking like a tiny general. She looks happy. She looks powerful. She realized that the quiet girl her father wanted wasn't the real Sarah. The real Sarah was the one on the tree stump. She had just spent 25 years trying to hide her. She looked at her reflection in her childhood bedroom, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't look for a flaw. She looked for that little girl on the stump. Building the internal sanctuary. If you want to stop being a stranger to yourself, you have to create a space where other people's opinions aren't allowed. This is your internal sanctuary. It is a mental room where you keep the truths about yourself that never change. Inside this sanctuary, you don't keep your trophies or your likes on Instagram. You keep your values. You keep the things you love, the things you have survived, and the things you believe in. Pillar 1, self-compassion. This means talking to yourself the way you would talk to a best friend. If your friend made a mistake at work, you wouldn't call her a fraud or a failure. You would say, "It's okay, you'll do better next time." You deserve that same kindness. Pillar 2, values alignment. When you know what you stand for, like honesty, creativity, or kindness, other people's opinions matter less. If you are living by your values, you are successful, no matter what the external mirror says. Pillar 3, radical ownership. You are the only person who lives in your head. You are the only person who gets to decide what is true about you. You have to take the remote control of your self-worth back from the world. Eleanor Roosevelt eventually moved into a small house called Valkill. It was her own space, away from her mother-in-law and the pressures of the White House. It was her physical, internal sanctuary. There, she wrote, she worked, and she decided who she wanted to be. She stopped trying to be the perfect hostess and started being the woman who would eventually help write the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She didn't wait for her mother to tell her she was beautiful. She decided she was useful. And for Eleanor, being useful was much better than being pretty. The first flicker of the switch, you might feel like your dimmer switch is stuck. You might feel like you've been living in the dark for so long that the light would hurt your eyes. That's okay. You don't have to turn the lights to 100% today. Start by noticing when you reach for the switch. Notice when you're about to say something in a meeting, but then you swallow your words. Notice when you want to wear a bright color, but you choose the gray sweater instead. Notice when someone gives you a compliment and you immediately try to fix the mirror by saying, "Oh, it was nothing," or "I just got lucky." When you catch yourself doing these things, just stop for a second. You don't have to change the behavior yet. Just say to yourself, "I am doing it again. I am looking in the cracked mirror." Awareness is the beginning of power. Once you see the pattern, you can start to break it. You can start to realize that the person you see in the mirror isn't a stranger. She is a woman who has been hidden under years of other people's expectations. She is the girl on the tree stump. She is the poet in the silence. She is the leader who is tired of playing small. The journey from being a stranger to being unshakable isn't about changing who you are. It's about getting rid of everything that isn't you. It's about cleaning the glass until you can see the truth. But even when you start to see the truth, a new problem often shows up. As soon as you start to step into your power, a small, cold voice in the back of your head will whisper, "Who do you think you are? You're just pretending." Soon, everyone will find out you don't know what you're doing. Even Maya Angelou, after writing 11 books and winning dozens of awards, still heard that voice. She still felt like she was running a game on everyone. She felt like a fraud. Why does success often make us feel more like a lie than failure does? Why do we feel like imposters just as we are finally starting to shine? Chapter 2, Why Does Success Feel Like a L? "I have written 11 books, the woman said, her voice like velvet and gravel mixed together. She was sitting with a close friend, the kind of person you tell your deepest secrets to. This wasn't just any woman. This was Maya Angelou. She had been nominated for the most famous awards in the world. She had traveled the globe and spoken to kings and presidents. But each time, she continued, her eyes serious, I think, oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out." Her friend sat back, shocked. How could one of the greatest writers in history feel like a liar? How could a woman who moved the world with her words believe she was just running a game? Maya wasn't joking. Despite the shelves full of books and the rooms full of applause, a small voice inside her was always whispering that she was a fraud. She felt like a traveler who had snuck onto a luxury ship without a ticket, waiting for the captain to walk by and demand to see her papers. This feeling didn't go away as she got older or more famous. It stayed. It sat in the corner of her mind during every book signing and every speech. She felt like her success was a mistake that the world simply hadn't noticed yet. The birth of the fraud feeling in the late 1970s, two researchers named Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Susan Emez were noticing something strange. They were talking to women who were doing incredible things, doctors, lawyers, and top students. These women had all the proof in the world that they were smart and capable. They had the degrees on their walls and the high grades on their papers. But when the doctors sat down with these women, they heard the same story over and over again. These high achievers didn't think they were smart. They thought they were lucky. They thought they had tricked the admissions boards. They lived in constant fear that at any moment someone would tap them on the shoulder and say, "We made a mistake. You don't belong here." The researchers gave this feeling a name, the imposter phenomenon. Today, we call it imposter syndrome. It is a glitch in the human brain. It happens when your external reality, your success, doesn't match your internal map, how you see yourself. Because you grew up with a cracked mirror or an unwritten script that told you to stay small, your brain cannot process your own wins. Instead of feeling proud when you win, your brain feels exposed. This happens to women more often because of the unwritten script. For generations, the script for a good woman was about being quiet, helpful, and behind the scenes. When a woman steps into the spotlight or takes a seat at the head of the table, she is tearing up the script. Her brain, trying to keep her safe from judgment, sends out a red alert. It tells her she is an imposter because she is doing something the old script said she shouldn't do. Sarah's lucky break in a glass-walled office in Seattle, Sarah Jenkins stared at a piece of paper until the numbers started to blur. It was her annual performance review. At the bottom, in bold ink, her boss had written, "Exceptional performance. 10% bonus awarded." Sarah should have been jumping for joy. She had worked 60-hour weeks to fix the data mess left behind by the last project manager. She had saved the firm millions of dollars. But as she looked at the exceptional rating, her stomach did a slow, painful flip. "He's being nice because he knows I'm a mom," she thought. "Or maybe the data just happened to work out this time. I got lucky. If they ask me to do it again next year, they'll see I don't actually know what I'm doing." The fraud alarm in her head was ringing at full volume. When her boss, Dave, walked by her desk to congratulate her, Sarah didn't say thank you. Instead, she started to point out her mistakes. "Thanks, Dave, but honestly, the software did most of the heavy lifting," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "And I think I could have handled the timeline a lot better. I was actually pretty disorganized in October." She was trying to confess before she got caught. She was lowering the dimmer switch on her own success so that Dave wouldn't look too closely and realize she wasn't the genius he thought she was. Sarah was suffering from a classic case of the expert imposter. She believed that unless she knew every single thing about her job, she was a total failure. By trying to be humble, Sarah was actually hurting herself. She was telling her boss and herself that her hard work didn't count. She was following the old script that said a woman must never be too proud or too loud about her wins. The 5 faces of the imposter syndrome doesn't look the same for everyone. It wears different masks depending on how you were raised and what you value. Researchers have found that most women fall into one of 5 categories. The perfectionist, you set goals that are impossible to reach. When you hit 99% of your goal, you focus only on the 1% you missed. You feel like a failure because you weren't perfect. The superwoman, you feel like you have to work harder and longer than everyone else to prove you aren't a fraud. You stay late at the office and try to be the perfect mom and friend at the same time. You are exhausted because you think your worth is tied to how much you do. The natural genius, you think that if you are truly smart, things should come easy to you. If you have to struggle to learn a new skill, you take it as proof that you are a fake. The soloist, you believe you have to do everything by yourself. If you ask for help, you feel like you are admitting that you aren't capable. The expert, you feel like you need to have every certification, every book, and every piece of information before you can speak up. You are terrified of being asked a question you don't know the answer to. Sarah was a mix of the expert and the superwoman. She thought she had to work 3 times as hard as the men in her office just to stay even with them. She didn't realize that her male colleagues weren't worrying about being found out. They were just doing their jobs. Eleanor's White House ghost, even women who seem like the definition of power have walked this path. When Eleanor Roosevelt moved into the White House as the First Lady, she didn't feel like a leader. She felt like an intruder. Eleanor had grown up being told she was plain and solemn. Her own mother had made her feel like she was a disappointment. When she became the most famous woman in America, those old voices didn't go away. They followed her into the halls of the White House. She was terrified of the press. She was worried she would say the wrong thing and embarrass her husband. She felt like she was playing a part in a play she hadn't auditioned for. One day, Eleanor had to host a major event. She felt that familiar cold knot of not belonging in her chest, but instead of hiding, she made a choice. She realized that her fear of being a fraud was actually a sign that she was doing something important. She decided that if the world was going to look at her, she might as well give them something worth seeing. She started holding her own press conferences, the first First Lady ever to do so. She only invited female